Right now, Ukraine's terrifying revenge is underway and it cannot be stopped. The armed forces of Ukraine have destroyed the enemy's energy hub. The main factories are ablaze. Urgent, our forces have succeeded. The armed forces of Ukraine are taking control of Pokrovsk. The clearing of Kupyansk has begun. The Russians have fallen into a fiery trap there. This is happening right at this very moment. Footage has exploded across the internet. Putin is in shock, handing over a death zone for the enemy. A sensation. London is dropping weapons on Moscow. Secret aid to Ukraine has been revealed. A secret arsenal will change the rules of the game forever. What exactly has Britain prepared for the armed forces of Ukraine? Plan infighting in Moscow? The split in the Kremlin has reached its limit. An Akhmat general has turned against Putin. An explosion in the Z camp. Nothing like this has ever happened in Russia before. Nuclear end. The US has destroyed Putin's dream, the newest secret missile. The secret is out. Who will be the first victim of America's nuclear miracle? All this and more in our upcoming report. Hotspot. Urgent retaliation for the shelling of Ukraine did not take long. Life in Russia has turned into hell. The Ukrainian armed forces have simply scorched the enemy's oil heart. The most important facilities are ablaze. Ukraine has put Russia through a real oil agony. How are our fighters turning prime aerial targets into ruins? Watch.
From the promise to take Kyiv in 3 days to total blackouts and the introduction of a state of emergency now within Russia itself.
We're bored. Stagnation. We want some action.
Thanks to bunker dwellers and Ukrainian drones in some regions of the Russian Federation, as Putin would say, things are really heating up. For example, in Krasnodar Krai last night, there were the characteristic sounds of incoming strikes. Sirens, alarms, and explosions were heard in Henichesk, Anapa, and Novorossiysk. As a result, in Novorossiysk alone, a nighttime attack damaged an oil depot at the Sheskari's transshipment complex, one of Russia's largest oil terminals, through which a significant portion of Putin's oil exports pass. Part of the coastal facilities was also destroyed, according to local officials. In addition, debris from already downed drones damaged a tank and the pier of Chernomorsky Transneft. The latter led to the actual suspension of oil pumping to the port of Novorossiysk. A state of emergency has been declared in the city itself.
This is a disaster.
Later, it turned out that the state of emergency in the city was introduced not for the safety of citizens, but to hide the aftermath of the strikes. After all, not only the Russian oil facilities were hit, but also the local military unit was destroyed. An air defense unit was stationed on its grounds. At least one S-400 system and an ammunition depot were there. One of the eyewitness videos captured the moment the Russian ammunition depot was hit.
For the very first time ever, such a powerful afterburner has been seen at an oil depot.
After the footage was published, Russian Z military correspondents quickly pointed out that a Ukrainian drone couldn't have reached the target that fast. But a missile could have. The Kremlin's worst fears were soon confirmed by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky.
Last night, our soldiers successfully used long-range Neptunes against specific targets on Russian territory. This is our entirely justified response to the ongoing Russian terror. Ukrainian missiles are now delivering more tangible and precise results almost every month. And
even though Zelensky did not specify in his address which exact targets the Ukrainian armed forces struck, there is little doubt left among experts.
Refer to official sources. Based on official sources that publish videos and generally provide officially verified information, there is reason to believe that this type of Ukrainian weaponry is starting to appear and be used against the Russian Federation on a much larger scale. As a result,
Ukrainian attacks are becoming much more large-scale time after time. So, besides Novorossiysk, last night the Ukrainian armed forces once again targeted the Saratov oil refinery. A week earlier, Ukrainian drones had already struck the oil refinery. At that time, the facility had to be temporarily shut down. Now, hopefully, the refinery will be shut down for good.
There are still far too many military facilities on Russian territory that need to be taken out. And the lights in Moscow will go out almost automatically once certain facilities on Russian territory are shut down. We won't even have to try that hard for Russia to lose its Ilyich light bulb. That will definitely happen. It is inevitable.
Meanwhile, the Russian Eagle is plunging into complete darkness.
Will it fly again? Yeah, it's flying. I swear to you, you fool. It's fine, really. Is this the third one already? Yeah? So right now. Basically, they're launching rockets from our airstrip. There it is.
The local residents still can't recover from the recent raid by Ukrainian drones.
I don't know if it was the right thing to do or not, but I went outside and basically everything was on fire.
All this is despite the fact that the Ukrainian armed forces, unlike the Russian army, strike exclusively at legitimate targets, military facilities of the Kremlin. As for imagining what will happen when Ukrainian flamingos and long-range Neptunes actively join the attacks, we will be able to see that in the coming months. After all, according to experts, serial production of the latest Ukrainian weapons has already begun, which means things will only get worse from here, at least for the military-industrial complex and Russia's oil industry.
This is quite a diverse range, which allows us to destroy, strike and eliminate targets en masse on the territory of the Russian Federation, even at significant distances from the borders or the front lines. This in fact is a rather serious and clear indicator that step by step we are systematically taking out key targets on Russian territory and destroying, among other things, military production.
At this very moment, the Ukrainian armed forces have succeeded. Pokrovsk is coming under the control of Ukrainian infantry. The clearing operation is proceeding block by block. Meanwhile, Kupyansk has become a grave for the Russians. Everything is changing there, and every minute determines the fate of the city. What is happening there right now? Watch the report for all the latest news from the front line.
The Ukrainian army is clearing Pokrovsk of the occupiers. Infantry groups are advancing into the eastern part of the city. Additional units are reinforcing positions, establishing new blocking lines, and beginning to clear the neighborhoods. Telegram channels report that the control zones into which Pokrovsk can be conditionally divided are currently separated as follows. The southern and southwestern parts are under the control of the occupiers. The area around the railway in the center is a gray zone. The north remains under the control of Ukrainian defense forces.
Both sides are using the weather conditions to rotate their personnel. At the moment, fighting is ongoing in Pokrovsk for control over the industrial zone. This includes the area of the meat processing plant and the feed mill, where the situation is the most difficult. Ukrainian defense forces control the area with apartment buildings, which the occupiers are trying to seize in order to use them as commanding heights to control the logistics of the Ukrainian defense forces.
The situation in Pokrovsk is difficult, but not hopeless. The city is under constant attack by the Russian army around the clock, but the Ukrainian armed forces are giving a worthy response. And here is a vivid, or rather not so vivid, example of the defense. These shots show the elimination of the 51st Russian army near Pokrovsk. Relying on the weather conditions, the occupiers felt rather careless, which led to their elimination. Nevertheless, the enemy is planning an offensive with two armies from two directions toward Raishine, where they intend to meet and close the encirclement. These plans are being thwarted by the Ukrainians, who have no intention of leaving Pokrovsk.
The Ukrainian defense forces have managed to significantly improve the tactical situation in the area of Rodinske, a key logistics hub for the Ukrainian defense forces. Moreover, in the so-called Dobropilya direction, the occupiers are forced to acknowledge the successful nature of the Ukrainian defense forces' counterattacks, aimed at preventing the expansion of the enemy's presence in areas where they have managed to wedge into Ukrainian defenses. From
the north and west, Russian invaders are advancing in the Kupyansk direction. The positions of the defense forces are being attacked by small enemy infantry groups supported by Russian drones, which is the only minor but effective offensive tactic the occupiers have, allowing them to report at least the capture of a street. During
the day, they made significant progress along Dzerzhinsky Street, liberating 7 large buildings.
In Kupyansk, the Russian tactics are similar to those in Pokrovsk. Here, the defense forces control about half of the city. The enemy's objective in the Kupyansk direction is to push Ukrainian units from the left bank of the Oskil River, seize the bridgehead at Borova, Izium, Sviatohirsk and Lyman, and thereby create a flank for an offensive on Sloviansk. And here is another foreigner, an Iraqi citizen who was captured near Kupyansk by our fighters from the 125th Brigade.
The Russians are disgusting. They treat people with cruelty and beat them. They force people to do things they don't want to do.
Allah Mohammed Tajil came to Russia on a tourist visa. But, as we can see, in Russia everyone has to fight, even foreign tourists. That's why the man was given several options: death, prison, or a contract with the Russian armed forces.
My friend asked the Russian soldiers for help to get to the Iraqi embassy in Russia, but they refused him.
As a result, the person in the video got so fed up with dealing with the Russians that he ran toward Kupyansk to surrender to the Ukrainians, realizing it was his only chance to survive.
It happened! Britain has joined the fight alongside Ukraine. London is sending new weapons to Ukraine, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. What Britain has prepared could radically strengthen the Ukrainian armed forces and turn the tide at the front. Watch for all the details.
Because of its weak position at the front, Russia is attacking critically important targets in Ukraine. Civilian infrastructure, destruction, and casualties among the population. Over the past day, Russian troops have attacked energy facilities in several regions of Ukraine. Restoration work is ongoing at the sites of impact. A very important aspect in this matter is energy assistance from the United Kingdom. Understanding the situation, the country has allocated more than 14 million euros.
Putin is trying to plunge Ukraine into darkness and cold as winter approaches. These treacherous strikes are not only an attack on Ukraine's security, but also a threat to the economic stability and growth of the United Kingdom.
London has announced the allocation of additional funds for carrying out vital repair work in Ukraine's energy sector to help Ukrainians this winter.
Russia has made Ukraine's civilian energy infrastructure a target in this war. Now, as we enter the cold winter, they are intensifying their brutal attacks on energy and heating networks while Putin tries to intimidate the Ukrainian people. However, Ukraine continues to demonstrate exceptional resilience despite all the hardships.
The funding for restoration will ensure uninterrupted lighting and heating in the homes of Ukrainians, as well as in hospitals and schools.
We are grateful to the United Kingdom and Prime Minister Keir Starmer for extending humanitarian and energy support to Ukraine, and for the announced energy assistance package. At a time when Russia is increasing the number of attacks on civilians and critical infrastructure, such solidarity is extremely important.
London continues to put pressure on Russia through sanctions as well. He announced new restrictions for the Kremlin, which will be gradually implemented throughout 2026. This is a continuation of sanctions against oil giants, Putin's associates, Rosneft and Lukoil.
These strikes pose a threat not only to Ukraine's security, but also to the economic stability of the United Kingdom itself. Ukraine's security is our security. Together with our G7 partners, we stand side by side, supporting Ukraine and overcoming all challenges.
From the very first days of the full-scale war, the United Kingdom became one of Ukraine's key strategic partners, not only supplying weapons, but also creating effective financial and institutional support mechanisms of support.
The United Kingdom will continue to decisively enforce our financial sanctions as part of our broader response to Russia's barbaric invasion of Ukraine.
The United Kingdom has established an important system of military assistance to Ukraine, financing innovative funds, international partnerships, credit mechanisms, and support for the Ukrainian defense industrial complex.
It is Russia, not Ukraine, that should pay for Putin's illegal war. The use of Russian assets to strengthen Ukraine's air defense. Our right to Ukraine's security is critically important to us.
The UK Ministry of Defence has signed contracts with companies for the maintenance of armoured vehicles, the production of artillery shells, and the repair of transferred weapons. These contracts provide for the deployment of repair facilities on Ukrainian territory. It was the United Kingdom that became one of the first countries to supply Ukraine with high-precision missile weaponry. A real breakthrough was the decision to provide long-range Storm Shadow missiles. In 2023, the British government announced the transfer of cruise missiles capable of striking targets at distances of more than 250 kilometers. Storm Shadow became the first long-range missiles received by Ukraine, and they were immediately used to strike strategic targets in the occupied territories. This month, the armed forces of Ukraine received a new batch of Storm Shadow missiles. The United Kingdom provided the Ukrainian armed forces with protective gear, transport, communications equipment, demining support, as well as assistance with maintenance, technology, and digital transformation. Britain became the first country to announce plans to supply Ukraine with main
battle tanks are heavily armored vehicles designed for frontline combat. They are equipped with powerful weapons and advanced protection systems, allowing them to engage enemy forces and support ground troops during military operations. It rotates a full 360 degrees in just 9 seconds, completing a complete revolution in that short amount of time. As part of the
delivery of Challenger 2 tanks, shells for them were also received. The British tanks were supplemented with specialized repair and recovery vehicles, which made it possible to ensure their technical autonomy in use. In 2025, Ukraine and Britain signed an agreement on a century-long partnership. This comprehensive document establishes long-term cooperation between the two countries in the areas of defense, economy, energy, justice, science, culture, education, healthcare, and social policy. Britain's assistance is long-term, so we can always count on the support of a reliable partner.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
Urgent! A split in the Kremlin. Akhmat has shaken Russia. The commander of the Akhmat Special Forces, Alaudinov, has once again found himself at the center of a media storm. But this time, it's not just Z-bloggers who have turned against him, but the Kremlin itself. What secret grievances have built up against the Chechen general, and what is really hidden behind this behind-the-scenes battle? Intrigue, clans, and the collapse of unity. Watch for all the details.
A new surge of internal tension in the Russian information space. This time, at the center of the story are the commander of the Chechen Special Unit Akhmat, Alaudinov, and an unexpectedly broad circle of Z-bloggers who until recently were considered unquestionable allies of the system.
So what's going on? I was a bit busy. I didn't even see that someone was supposedly addressing me, asking me questions, but people don't understand that they don't have what it takes to question me. We'll make them wise up. And those devils, all of them will burn in hell.
The conflict began with a rather simple question. Blogger Oksana Kebeleva asked why Alaudinov's information about the investigation into the deaths of the fighters with the call signs Ernest and Goodwin does not match the data that was previously reported.
So the post from which the fighting started this time. It was published by the Tavatniki Security, and they wrote the following. We are publishing this video for the first time, an interview with the deputy head of the main military political directorate of the Russian Armed Forces, Apti Alaudinov. It was recorded about a year ago. Watch and listen carefully. The commission investigating the deaths of the Bopolwashniks Ernest and Goodwin during the meat assault was formed by Defense Minister Belousov, directly under the supervision of Goromikin and Gerasimov. In other words, the investigation was conducted at the very highest level.
In a different situation, such a question would have gone unnoticed, but this time the response was harsh.
You don't have the right to ask such questions. It's not right to question our Lieutenant General, and you shouldn't do that. And what exactly is he supposed to decide? Maybe it's you who needs to make up your mind. You yourselves no longer know whom to attack just for media hype.
Then came a sharp response from Alaudinov's defender. A statement was recorded in which one of the Z commentators was accused of having ties to Navalny supporters.
Who would doubt that Oksana Koboleva, who today, in a frenzy, lashed out at a current general and hero of Russia, was previously an active supporter of Navalny? Here's what she wrote back in 2012. There she talks about supporting an armed uprising and about Putin, whom she wanted to leave back in 2012. But now she inserts the word Putin into every post.
The speech was emotional, with direct jabs at bloggers. In addition, Alaudinov has started to publicly attack his critics, accusing one of ties to the opposition and another of using disrespectful language. After a few days, Koboleva is detained under the article on discrediting the army, supposedly for old posts. But the coincidence seems just a little too timely.
You should stop pretending to be a patriot, because it's not for you, Oksana Ravkatovna, attacking an active general, trying to smear him and twisting his videos. I'll add from myself that this phrase about Apti Aronovich Alaudinov supposedly believing the investigation is bribed, that was added on their own. There is no such phrase in the video, never was and never could be. So this is just another attack and media hype for which you could be charged with slander and discreditation.
The spiders in the jar are starting to devour each other. Obviously, some are on Alaudinov's side, while others are demanding explanations. But the main thing is becoming clear to everyone. This conflict is more than just an argument on social media. This is a struggle for control over who today has the right to speak out loud, even within the loyalist space.
I saw on Okrenuta, for some reason, a completely unnecessary and absolutely wrong attack on Aptiaronovich, and it really upset me. This is a big mistake.
In turn, some major channels began demanding explanations from Alaudinov and his press office. In response, anonymous leaks appeared claiming that bloggers are working for foreign interests and fueling conflict around the so-called special operation. The scandal around Alaudinov is not an isolated incident, but a symptom of how quickly the rules change in the system and how easily those who were insiders yesterday can find themselves on the edge today.
The front is torn apart. Putin is in a state of shock. The AFU have achieved the impossible. The Russian army is falling apart at the seams. The front line has turned into a death zone for the occupiers. Sensational! 3 enemy columns have been destroyed at once. These images have shocked the entire world. Take a look.
Russian assaults have become even more massive and ruthless, above all for the Russians themselves. So, in just 3 days, the AFU have already destroyed a 3rd enemy column that was advancing to attack Ukrainian positions. It was reported the day before that the defense forces destroyed a concentration of manpower from the 51st Russian Army near Pokrovsk. The incident occurred in the settlement of Zatoshok Donetsk region. As reported by the Special Operations Forces in their Telegram channel, at the moment the drone was used, enemy personnel from 2 brigades were concentrated in the building, tasked with encircling the Pokrovsk-Mirnorad agglomeration from the north. At the same time, analysts highlight other successes of the defense forces in this direction as well.
Another settlement is Krasny Lyman and Rodinsky. As far as I know, Rodinsky is, practically completely cleared of enemy presence. In addition, fighting is taking place in the area of Kotlin and Pershitrevnya, 1st of May. There is also rather alarming information regarding the settlement of Rivne. It is located right between Pokrovsk and Mirnohrad. There the enemy tried to break through our defensive lines. This attack was repelled.
Speaking about the situation in Pokrovsk itself, experts note that, as before, the occupiers are aiming to cut off the logistics of the AFU. However, as before, they have not succeeded in doing so. At the same time, both President Zelensky and Commander-in-Chief Syrskyi are openly commenting on the situation.
Yes, the enemy has entered the city. Yes, the enemy is trying to attack the central part and the northern part of the city. However, we are saying that, first and foremost, the most important thing is that the defensive operation, the defense by our units in Pokrovsk, is ongoing. Today, all sorts of scenarios are being drawn up about how this battle might end. We won't be discussing them today, not because we don't know or don't want to. We understand perfectly well that the commanders on the ground and those above them are working through various scenarios, even the most negative developments of the situation.
However, experts believe that it is still far too early to talk about negative scenarios. Moreover, our general staff, when describing the situation in Pokrovsk, notes that the situation has been partially stabilized, and in some areas, there have even been successes.
When talking about the actions of the 425th Separate Assault Battalion, Syrskyi apparently refers to another raid by the regiment's assault troops, which was shown in a video that was published by the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. The video was geolocated by the Ukrainian channel Infighting, which commented as follows: Assault groups of the Skilya regiment are conducting a raid on the northern part of Pokrovsk, clearing out individual Russian positions in the private sector and dispersing throughout the city. Interestingly, the groups managed to link up with the fighters who are holding the city council building in the city center, already beyond the railway line that divides the city in half and serves as a kind of barrier. In other words, the previous video where Skelya's groups made their way through half the city to the city council wasn't just a flag for show, but a full-fledged capture and holding of the position.
So, despite all the statements from the Russian command claiming that Russia confidently controls Pokrovsk, Ukrainian fighters are not only able to enter the city council building in the southern part of the city and wave a flag, but also to set up a full-fledged strongpoint there. This also applies to the recent triumphant advance of a Russian column into the city from the Donetsk direction.
In fact, here is that very column known to everyone, which has already been dubbed the Mad Max column after the famous film. Russian propagandists replayed it countless times, but ultimately forgot to show the most important part, the ending, how the fighting ended for these inhumans. In fact, it was a rout.
But that wasn't enough for the Russians, and just yesterday they advanced in a similar column to attack Kostiantinivka. The result was identical.
The Russians are trying to impose a chaotic tactic of assault raids, hiding behind the weather conditions as their last shield. But now, even the fog is not always an ally. Sometimes it's a trap. The Ukrainian armed forces use, among other things, thermal imaging and optical surveillance equipment, drones with artificial intelligence, and rapid coordination between reconnaissance and firepower. That's why those who head into the fog are in reality walking toward their own doom. The Ukrainian army demonstrates not only technological superiority, but also operational maturity. 2 columns, 2 attempts at a surprise offensive, and both times Russia loses everything: equipment, infantry, and the ability to maneuver.
While repelling massive attacks on Pokrovsk, the Ukrainian armed forces are also keeping an eye on another important point on the war map: Kupyansk. It is precisely there that Russia is applying pressure to tie down our reserves in the Kharkiv region and prevent their redeployment to the Donbas. However, the Russians are not achieving their desired results there.
At present, our defense forces are systematically and methodically clearing those areas around Kupyansk where the enemy had infiltrated over a fairly long period of time. Regarding Kupyansk, I remain firmly hopeful that we will manage, if not tomorrow or the day after, then in the near future, to fully stabilize the situation on this section of the front.
And at the same time, to disrupt the Russian rear, experts add, and there are already the first signs of this. In particular, yesterday's strike on the port of Novorossiysk has been called by many a real turning point, both in the war and in the collapse of the Russian economy.
Ukrainian forces have reached a new milestone. For the first time, they successfully struck Russia's main oil export gateway in the south, the port of Novorossiysk, with a massive attack. Drones hit the area, but most importantly, missiles as well. The drones distracted the air defense, while Flamingo-type missiles, I'm sure no other kind could have caused such flashes and explosions, delivered the decisive blow. On your screens are videos from local residents showing powerful explosions in several parts of the port.
Like the ports on the Baltic, Novorossiysk remains a key location for Russia when it comes to oil trade. It is also one of the most heavily protected points by air defense systems. If our missiles manage to bypass these systems, we can confidently say there will soon be a sharp increase in explosions in Russia.
The nuclear arms race has been derailed. The US destroyed Putin's reputation with a single strike. Shocking. The dictator boasted about the Burevestnik. The Americans unveiled their latest secret missile. The secret has been revealed. What is this technological marvel? How great is its destructive power, and who is it really aimed at? Watch for all the shocking details.
Putin has gone too far. The US has responded to the dictator's wonder weapon.
I really doubt I can actually add anything new here, to be honest.
That's for sure. You've already added everything you could. First, Putin announced the completion of decisive tests of the intercontinental cruise missile with a nuclear engine, the Burevestnik, which according to him has no analogues in the world.
As is known in terms of range, the Burevestnik has surpassed all known missile systems in the world.
After that, he announced the successful launch of the nuclear torpedo Poseidon from a submarine.
This is an advanced underwater, autonomous unmanned underwater device called Poseidon. Also equipped with a sophisticated nuclear power unit. For the very first time, we managed not only to successfully launch it from the carrier submarine using the booster engine, but also to start up to activate the nuclear power unit.
But all the attempts at intimidation turned out to be in vain, and now Putin should think carefully about what tall tales to tell next time. After all, Washington has now given a clear response by showing the world its latest nuclear weapon. On October 29th, a bomber was spotted over California with an unusual object under its wing. It was the latest nuclear missile, developed as part of a secret program to modernize the US nuclear arsenal. The publication Defense News called it a leap into a new era of strategic deterrence, noting that the missile is smaller, stealthier, and far more lethal than its predecessors. It is built using stealth technology, which allows it to avoid detection by enemy radars. The public appearance of the missile under the wing of a B-52 bomber was its first demonstration in actual flight. And this was an official test flight, not a training exercise. With a range of over 2,400 kilometers, the new missile allows American bombers to strike from beyond the reach of even the most advanced air defense systems. Let us recall that at the end of October, US President Donald Trump ordered the Pentagon to immediately begin testing nuclear weapons after Putin flaunted the capabilities of the Burevestnik in front of everyone. Well, let's see what the Russian dictator will boast about next.
that's all for now. For more breaking news from the front, tune in to our next episode.